Welcome back to Real Takes, where we are all movie love all the time. I'm Ann Stott, and tonight it's a really good thing we're all movie love all the time because I have so much rage about this leaked Supreme Court decision that if I hadn't set up this situation where I have to channel myself back into love, I could be ranting and raving about movies I hate, and you know, who wants to hear about that? Some people do, but that's not what we're about here. So before I get into the movie we're going to love on tonight, I will say that we've been highlighting different organizations that have been, part of the Ukrainian relief effort, whether helping people in Ukraine or helping Ukrainian refugees in response to the war, and we will continue to highlight those organizations. But I've actually been thinking that I really like this tradition in general of highlighting an organization I like every week. And so this week, given this leaked Supreme Court decision, we are highlighting the Yellowhammer Fund, which helps provide safe, affordable abortions to women in the South. So I will link to them in the description below, and I ask you to please donate to them. I also want to shout out to some films that actually have characters who get abortions, which is a really rare thing, actually. Producers don't want to touch abortion, even though a majority of the people in this country believe that abortion should be legal. So I'm just going to mention some films that have bravely had characters who have abortions. Obvious Child is one. Actually, way ahead of its time, Dirty Dancing is one. Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, which we might actually talk about at some point here on this channel. A beautiful film that came out a couple of years ago. It was a great movie about two teen girls who travel to New York so one of them can get an abortion. 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. Vera Drake. There are a few others that I'll list in the description, but watch these movies. Let the powers that be who make movies know that women want to see movies made about their whole lives. Okay, tonight we are shining all the movie love on The Half of It, which came out in 2020 and was written and directed by Taurus Alice Wu and stars Leah Lewis, Daniel Diemer, and Alexis Lemire. Now, The Half of It is kind of a coming-of-age story, but it's a coming-of-age story told through a modern twist on the Cyrano de Bergerac story. So there's a guy, a very sweet but not so bright guy, Paul, and he hires Ellie Chu, the only Asian American student in her high school, who has a business writing papers for other students. Paul hires Ellie to write a love letter to Astor, with whom Ellie is already in love, and thus sets up all the tension and conflict of this sweet rom-com. Except that even though it's primarily using the Cyrano de Bergerac story, it actually starts with a retelling of Plato's Symposium with some animation. So I'm not doing a very good job of putting this all together because that sounds like a mess, and it's actually beautifully done. So Alice Wu, the writer and director, was actually a computer scientist, and she left computer science to make films. And in 2005, she kind of burst onto the indie filmmaking scene with Saving Face, a movie about a Chinese-American doctor who's having a hard time coming out to her family and her community, and particularly her mother, played by the one and only Joan Chen, who is going through her own midlife relationship crisis, and they end up living together. And this film was ahead of its time in a lot of ways. Way before The Farewell, it was set almost completely in the Chinese American community based in Queens, and it was like half in English, half in Mandarin. It's a really sweet rom-com. And then Alice Wu had a lot of life stuff happen, and she didn't make another movie until 2020's The Half of It. So that's a long time between films, 15 years. But it's interesting because she made another really great, sweet rom-com, but with a lot of different themes at play than the first movie. So you could say, oh, Alice Wu makes rom-coms, but when you look at these movies, they're actually really different films. And The Half of It is set in a small town in Washington State, which is actually, it's not set in, it's a fictional town, but Alice Wu has spent time in a small town in Washington State. And Ellie, the main character, and her father are the only Asian American family in the community. And Alice Wu has said that, you know, she said it doesn't matter how small the town is in the United States. Like, you go to a small town in the United States and there's always like one immigrant family or one family of color or one Black family. So to her, that's very real to her experience. And I love this film for a bunch of reasons. A lot of what I love about this film is that it's subverting itself all the time. So Alice Wu has said it's a movie about a main character who doesn't know she's a main character and doesn't really want to be a main character. It's a love triangle rom-com that ultimately is more interested or just as interested in friendship relationships as it is in who's going to end up with who at the end of the movie. It's a coming of age story, but Alice Wu has also said it's not really about teen life. Like, it could have, she said it could have just as easily been set in a nursing home as in a high school. It's not particularly interested with adolescence per se. It's a story about grief, but without any of the sort of standard mainstream cathartic grief-oriented moments. I really like that it's a coming of age story about a lesbian that is not really a coming out story. Like, okay, so jumping in to expound on this a little bit. So I like this both about the coming out issue and also about the fact that the main character in the story is Asian American. So, you know, as marginalized communities get access to the funds and the resources to tell their stories, you know, at first sometimes those stories are just blatantly about the marginalized experience, right? The coming out experience, the immigrant family experience. And those stories are really important. And I'm for those stories. And I like movies. There are movies I like that are just blatantly coming out stories and, you know, mostly, you know, immigrant family experience stories. I have plenty of movies I like that. But, what I enjoy here is that within the context of a sweet rom-com, we have a character who's in love with a woman in love with a woman, and who is Chinese American, and those things are completely acknowledged, and yet they're not the only focus, or even really the main focus. And that feels like storytelling progress to me, where we can have that experience in the mix, we can have it honored and respected for what it is, and yet not have it be the only thing we're looking at, right? So I really enjoy that about this film. And again, I think so many different layers and themes are being deftly handled here within the context of this, like, you know, light, sweet rom-com. It's impressive. The film's much more interested with these characters finding themselves on other levels besides sexuality. Okay, I have to jump back in and make sure I'm clear about this. So I want to be clear that this issue about what stories are getting told, I see as a gatekeeper issue, not a storyteller issue, right? So people from marginalized communities, from immigrant communities, from, gay and trans communities, from Black and brown communities have been wanting to tell all kinds of stories all along, but especially with film, which is an expensive medium, if the majority of the people who have the power to give you the money and the resources to make the films aren't of those communities, and they're only meting out, very few opportunities to tell those stories, and then they're bringing their own prejudices to the stories from these marginalized communities that they choose to fund. Sometimes the stories that get told are like the more simplistic ones. And hopefully we're now in a time where there are more resources for people from marginalized communities to tell nuanced stories about themselves. And I think we are in a moment like that. And I hope it's a sign of permanent change rather than a moment. I feel like it's different than the moments that have come before. So let's all hope for that. But then it's the other reason I love it is that it's a really sweet rom-com that is really smart. And partially it's smart because of all these things I just mentioned and how deftly all those different themes and layers are integrated and handled in the script. Like the script feels pretty seamless. But it's also smart in that Ellie Chu is a very smart character and Aster is a very smart character. And so the film, touches on Sartre and Remains of the Day and Diego Rivera and, starts with a retelling of Plato's Symposium and references a lot of classic film, including Wim Wenders and Bollywood. So there's just cultural, literary, cinematic references like flying all around this movie in really smart, entertaining ways that like bolster up the characters and the story. And it's a really unique take on several different, very standard storytelling forms that we're used to in American cinema. And so I'm completely charmed by it. It is firmly on my list of fun movies that are also smart. I have a running list of like lighter, fun movies that don't insult your intelligence. This doesn't just not insult my intelligence. It's actually really smart. And when you watch interviews with Alice Wu, you're not surprised about how smart it is because she's clearly really smart. And I want to say that like it's not she very specifically wanted to keep the world that Ellie and Paul and Aster are in like very realistic. So it's not like overtly cinematically artistic, but there's some really nice moments. The opening introduction is beautiful, the animation. And then there are a couple of really nice, beautiful moments. And there's something very rich about, again, how these characters are sort of led through finding themselves that I love. So the half of it came out in 2020. So enjoyable. Please watch the movie if you haven't seen it. Let me know what you think of it. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe so the algorithms will let you know when the next one is out. And I will see you next Wednesday. Thanks for watching Real Takes. Hit the subscribe button below so the algorithms will tell you when new episodes are out. And if you want to support Real Takes, please visit my Patreon page where you can join at any tier from $2 to $100 per thing I make. The $15 tier is specifically about supporting Real Takes, and you'll get behind-the-scenes information and be thanked in future videos. See you next Wednesday.